Hello, welcome. Today I am joined by Matt Taylor, who is the founder and group MD of Sano Physio. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Andy. Thank you very much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, it's we've still got some nice weather here, so I've been able to enjoy a little bit of that.
Nice weather even in the grim northwest.
It's in well, I think that's why we appreciate it even more because when you do get it, I actually went out and had a coffee with a friend earlier on this morning. It was delightful. So yeah, I've got a great little sun trap spot that I go on Burton Road. So a lot of client meetings happen there. So if you ever come over, we'll go.
Looking forward to it, yeah.
So I'm just admiring your backdrop there. So just looking into your background, I know you spent some time at Sheffield Wednesday. So is there any link to, because that looks, when I look at that backdrop, that looks very owl territory from that side.
Absolutely, unfortunately not. So I worked at Sheffield Wednesday for about 6 years, part-time with the academy there and a bit with the first team, but I'm actually an Aston Villa fan. So yeah, Sano should really be claret and blue on that note. But yeah, nothing to do with the Wednesday, unfortunately. Just a typical, I think, physio blue, silver, white is where it's come from.
Yeah, classic and professional. It's very nice anyway. So how come you're a Villa fan?
Um, Good question. I've asked myself that for the last 42 years, and still continue to ask myself that as well, especially on recent performances. But I've just always supported them. Probably drawn to the colour of the kit when I was younger, and I'd like to say through thick and thin, but it's very much been through thin for the last 42 years. So apart from 96 when we beat Leeds United in the League Cup final, being a Leeds lad, that were a good day in my life, but fairly modest since then, I think.
So was that Milosevic or was he before then?
Milosevic scored in that final, yeah, 3-0. Milosevic, and I want to say Merson and potentially Collymore as well.
Right.
I might not be right on the latter there, but Milosevic scored in the final.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I love that era of football, like the 90s and noughties era of football. I just think was maybe, I don't know whether it's an age thing, but I was reflecting with a few mates on it recently. But I just think it was great. Although last night's game was obviously epic as well. So it's not like it's like bad now.
Last night, last night's
The
game, with the game last night?
the Champions League, the PSG, it's not PSG, sorry, the Inter versus Barca. Absolutely one of the best games I've ever seen. It was absolutely mental. 4-3 to Inter in extra time.
So Inter went through. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I stopped watching the Champions League about 2 weeks ago when we went out in the quarterfinal to PSG. So forgive me for that about last night.
That's good. It's good to know. This is a good indication of like sort of real sore loser. I like to see that side of things.
It'll come through in the podcast, don't worry. Yeah.
So we were talking about like the origins of things, and so you're actually a Leeds. Did you grow up in Leeds?
Yeah, Leeds born and bred, sat in Leeds now, not gone very far at all. From a small town called Pudsey. You probably heard of Pudsey Bear. That's where I'm from, yeah, and that's where the first clinic was set up in 2011. So yeah, grew up in Leeds, schooled in Leeds, went to uni in Leeds. Haven't really done much outside Leeds, to be honest with you.
So in terms of like when you decided on what you wanted to do, then like where did that interest in this area come from?
From a physio perspective, I often get asked this, and I'd probably say it's, so growing up, I played a lot of cricket, decent cricketer, but my brother played professional. He played professional cricket for 10 years, and I remember going to watch him maybe 15, 16 years old, playing for Yorkshire, watching the physio, what they did, and I think it was really the glamour of sports physio, running on, that got me into it. And from that point onwards, wanted to do physio. I didn't do as well as I wanted in my A levels. Didn't get on a physio degree, so I had to go and do sports science for 3 years first. But yeah, I would say it's largely that. I remember watching my brother and seeing the physio and what they did there, and thinking, quite a nice job is that, working outside in the sun, running on every now and again. I could do that, definitely.
And so, like, when you didn't get your grades, was that down to like lack of effort? Was it just you just didn't get the grades, or like what were the drivers behind that?
From an A-level point of view, I think it was getting to a point in life where you discover alcohol, going out, those sorts of things. And GCSEs got 9 straight A's. A-levels weren't as good, shall we say? They were the lower end of where I wanted to be. And yeah, missed out on physio, but got into sports science at Leeds University. Did that for 3 years. But yeah, always tried hard to a point. But yeah, kind of, I wouldn't say I went off the rails or anything like that when I was in my late teens, but probably not as focused as I should have been in hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty normal, isn't it? Really, like just at some point you're going to be, you just change, don't you? And like, I was very immature at that age, and didn't took me ages to come out of that period, and probably not till I actually got into a proper job when I really sort of kind of find yourself. And so, like, how helpful was that sports science? How helpful has it been?
I would say incredibly helpful. Certainly, from an anatomy point of view, just when I went to uni and did physio afterwards, just anatomy knowledge, physiology knowledge, just so much more advanced than other people on the course. I always knew I wanted to do MSK from a physio perspective. It just always appealed to me. I wasn't overly bothered about doing the other bits, the respiratory, the elderly care, etc. But that's one thing I would take from that sports science degree. We did a lot of anatomy and physiology. It was normally on a Thursday morning at Leeds Uni after you've been playing sport and had a decent night out on the Wednesday night with the sports teams, and then going into the lab on the Thursday morning and the cadavers there, the smell of formaldehyde. It was yeah, really, really good. But yeah, remember it well, and to be fair, I think that stood me in great stead as from a physio point of view.
Yeah, I've been into the lab, there, like the clinical labs there with the cadavers. It is quite an interesting experience, isn't it?
It's the smell. It's the smell that hits you. That smell of formaldehyde.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we do a few ultrasound guided injection courses there. It's quite interesting. So when you were doing the sports science, was there ever any thought, or what was the thought at that point? Did you always see that as a means to an end to go on to do physio, or did you think actually that maybe I wouldn't do that?
Yeah, I think it was for me. It was after your sort of freshers and your first year, it was drilling down and just making sure that I got a 2-1 in that, so I could then go on and do physio, which thankfully I got, and I went on to do It was a postgrad diploma at Huddersfield University, which 2-year course, and yeah, that was the next step really, and that's probably when I did really settle down and knuckle down with my studies. Like, think I did well there, and I had a really good 2 years at Huddersfield. Really enjoyed it, yeah.
So you actually left Leeds. That sounds quite impressive that you got out of Leeds to.
Lived in Leeds and got the train over and back every day. Hardly left.
And so you mentioned there about being that MSK was always your focus, that you wanted to do that. Like, did you have anything in mind for? I know the cricket had inspired you earlier on, but what was the goal at that point?
I don't think there really was, to be honest. It was just working in MSK. It's what excited me. It's what I enjoyed. Certainly from the undergrad degree in anatomy and physiology, I've really got an interest in that from doing that. And then yeah, naturally just went on from working in MSK and the NHS to a bit in professional sport as well. But yeah, I think always had an interest in the human body, how it works. Always been very sporty growing up. Played sort of semi-pro cricket, played rugby union, played football, played all these things, and just a natural interest in injuries. I've had my fair share of injuries, I think it's fair to say as well. Had a lot of orthopedic surgery, and all of that just kind of pushed me into that.
So, yeah, I mean, in terms of like the opportunities at that point, then, so the NHS was like, I'm sure would have been the main one then that was available. But did you? It feels like there's a lot more opportunities now for people to go into, and maybe less within the NHS. Like, what
Oh,
what was it like then?
the change is mind blowing. So I qualified in 2007, the year that I think statistically only 10% of graduates got jobs within the first 6 months of qualifying. I don't know why it was. I think it was that courses were really oversubscribed. There was a real shortage in jobs. I worked as a physio assistant to start with. I couldn't even get a physio job. Worked as a physio assistant, as did my wife, who I met on the course at the time, and good friends. We all struggled to get jobs. And I think so. On our postgraduate course, there were 10. I think 3 of that 10 or 2 of that 10 didn't actually even get a physio job and left the profession without even working post qualification. So it was really challenging at the time. It took me quite a few months to get an actual, we call band 5 sort of physio job at the time. And yeah, I remember working, and I would ring private practices saying I've been working for a year in the NHS. I was quite fortunate. I was just static in MSK. I'd really love to do some private work. I'm quite hungry for that. I wanted to earn some more money at the time. I wanted to get a mortgage or buy a new car and what have you. And I was just getting told the same thing. No, we don't take newly qualifieds on. We don't take people on with less than 7 years experience at the time seemed to be the sort of the going rate that you needed to have to work privately. So I stuck with the NHS. I was lucky that I had a fantastic senior at Rotherham Hospitals. That's where I started my first sort of junior job. He got me an interview at Sheffield Wednesday through somebody that he knew, and I really, really enjoyed that. But that was kind of through a friend, so to speak. Whereas nowadays, certainly I think the jobs market is a lot easier. There was a period, certainly, I think just before COVID, where at the time I was interviewing for junior physios. I don't do that anymore now because of the size of the business. You'd have junior physios come for interview, and have you got any questions for us? And they'd be saying, have I got a job? Because if not, I've got 3 other offers on the table. And I used to think to myself, wow, what a luxurious position to be in. We never had that when we qualified. But maybe that was a good thing. It was challenging to get into the profession, and possibly, made you even more sort of proud to be a physio and be earning a wage.
And so, what's changed just for when these? I know you're not doing the interviews now, but what is the general market like now for physios?
I think there's lots more opportunities out there. I think the private market is much more aligned to the NHS now. So, we as a business, and I know a lot of the large private providers out there take on new graduates from university. Private practice, I think when I qualified, used to be seen as you work for a period of time, you get really, really skilled, the top of your game, and then you navigate into private practice, and that's where you are until you retire. Whereas that mindset has changed, I feel now. And I think it's only a good thing that more and more private practices do take on less experienced clinicians or newly qualified clinicians, invest in them as we do, train them, work with them, and mentor them and turn them into really strong MSK clinicians now.
Yeah, no, I think it is a trend that's happening, and it's an interesting one to see where it goes. So that time you were at Sheffield Wednesday, and you were working at the NHS throughout that entire time as well.
Yeah.
And so, what was it like in terms of just doing that? How were the environments different? And I know being in both of them, they're the opposite ends of the spectrum. But how did you find managing those two things?
I guess it taught me a lot, to be fair, from being able to adapt from a communication point of view. You'd be working in the NHS, and you'd have, you'd work in the gym there, and you'd have your stereotypical OA knees, Rotherham, pit area, mining towns, etc. You'd have a lot of that sort of demographic, and then I'd finish work at 4:00, drive to the training ground in Sheffield Wednesday, and I'll be there in the treatment room with, Championship Premier League footballers who have a very different sort of outlook on life, opportunities, etc. But I suppose being able to go from one to the other in a 20-minute car journey, I think it was a good thing. It taught me a lot. Like I say, about communication, and adaptability as well. And also, I think, from a practice point of view, just ensuring that you're treating everyone as an individual. The changing demographic is so different, and the requirements and the needs of them demographics are so different. So yeah, flexibility is absolutely key.
In terms of getting taught that in general, whether it's in any environment that you're in, getting taught communication and understanding the client, like how is that done?
From a physio perspective or just in general?
I suppose from a physio perspective, so bearing in mind you're client facing pretty much all the time, that's essentially what your role is. There's a lot of emphasis on the clinical tools, but how much is done on communication and listening and those sort of things?
Yeah, I mean, as a business for us, we do put a lot of time and effort into that. I think soft skills are incredibly important when you're a physio. Communication, empathy, all of these things are, I would say, potentially at the start of a consultation or at the start of a patient journey, certainly more important than clinical skills. You think, you get into the mindset of a patient that comes to see you in pain, on medication, probably not slept, frustrated, not being able to do sport, or potential relationship issues as a result of their injury, etc. And when they come into that reception, to be greeted by your receptionist, they're not in a great place. And I think that we put a lot of time and effort at Sano into that customer care, if you like. We've got a client-centered care model that we champion, which is all about the soft skills and how you break down them boundaries, treating patients as individuals, making sure that we're setting goals bespoke to their needs and treatment plans bespoke to their needs as well. But it has to be on the job. We've tried to take it one step further and really work on that in our sort of clinical training that we do.
How receptive do you find, like how have you seen, like when you were starting, do you see any differences, or what are the differences between the students that are coming through now as to when you were doing it, if any?
Gosh, it seems that long ago when I was a sort of student and a newly qualified physio. I would certainly say that I feel quite old here, Andy, to be fair, but we're saying us and them. But when we were at uni back then, I'd certainly say we were taught a lot more from a hands-on skills perspective. Maybe that was just the university I went to. There were two really strong MSK tutors there, who used a lot of a whole range of sort of hands-on techniques, and we were taught that back then. Certainly nowadays, I would say with the introduction of the first contact practitioner role and being more rehab focused, I think that good hands-on skills from a physio perspective are probably not where they were 15, maybe 20 years ago. I'd say that's a fair point from what we see that comes into Sano in terms of new grads and new recruits. But it's something we're mindful of and something that we work with our clinicians on, to try and enhance that.
Yeah, no, I think it is really good, and it is really important to be able to support with those developmental pieces of things, because it is changing, isn't it? Like the NHS was geared around it, it's not a paid for service, or there's literally no cash changing hands, whereas that is quite a big shift, is what we see. And like, what's your experience for people that have worked extensively in the NHS and then moving into the private sector in terms of how they adapt and cope with being able to, or having to ask for money?
I think they struggle, if I'm honest. We have regular conversations about it, and there is almost, I always talk about it in clinic. There's this continuum between you've got clinicals at one end and commercials at the other end, and probably 90% of physios sit at that very clinical end, and it's very hard for physios to work towards a commercial end. I still feel as a profession we completely undervalue ourselves. What we stand for, the results that we deliver, the outcomes that we get. And yeah, in general, I would say that physios are reluctant to ask for money for the services that they provide, and it's something that we've regularly talked with physios about, and I guess from a coaching perspective, try to find out why that is, and reframing, etc., to try and change that mindset. Because ultimately, if somebody comes to see you and you know that you will get them better in a number of sessions, why would you not just be transparent about that and be honest about that? That individual has obviously made the decision that they're going to part with their hard-earned cash to come because they want to better themselves. They want to, be empowered or improve their outcome. And I think it's our jobs as physios to facilitate that. I think that, no physio is sat there thinking, well, this physio is going to make me X. This patient is going to make me X in terms of revenue. It's all about getting that patient better, but the money comes along with that, and it can be challenging at times.
Yeah, and I think definitely that's my experience of it as well. So in terms of because you're taking some people straight from university, then does that make that transition easier? Have you seen that the younger people do take to that better, or has the course itself, is that ingrained in it as well?
I'd say it's very much personality driven. I mean, as is the profession. It's not about how experienced you are as to your sort of ability to accept that people are paying money for the service. There's lots of different people out there working as physios with various different sort of levels of experience or need, etc. But I wouldn't say it's necessary down to experience. We've got, I mean, some physios that work for us or have worked for us in the past that 20, 25 years experience, and they're still, quite reluctant to rebook, or when there's sort of financial involvement there. From an ethical perspective, they still struggle with that. It's one of those things, but I do think it's all down to mindset, isn't it? And we work with a guy to try and sort of adapt that, change that. But ultimately, I think your personality drives it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you're right on it. And then that for you, so when you're doing that work, and then at what point was Sano in your mind as to something that you wanted to create?
Well, I mean, I set Sano up because I couldn't get a job as a senior physio in the NHS. So I started working in the NHS in 2007. Started working as a physio assistant, junior physio down at Rotherham for a year. Got the job at Wednesday, and then bought a house with my then girlfriend, now wife, and moved to Bradford teaching hospitals. But I worked for about 7 years, and could not get a senior job. Largely because the jobs were few and far between. They didn't come up that often. I remember one time there was a senior job that came up and there were 20 band fives inside the trust that applied for it, and they advertised it externally as well, which frustrated me at the time. But yes, I'd never got a senior job. And as a result of that, I think it's fair to say I got a little bit delusion with working in the NHS, and ended up setting up on my own. I bought a fold-up bed, hired a room in a gym, and yeah, had a go at it. And I guess the rest is history, as they say. But yeah, that was it was, I think, 2011 or 2012. I treated my first ever patient for Sano. So I'd been 4 or 5 years qualified at the time, and I worked in the NHS for 3 years doing Sano on the side as a bit of probably call it a side hustle nowadays. And that's how it started.
Yeah, no, I love hearing those stories. So there's no grand vision. There's no, this is what we're gonna do. This has got it all planned out. It's like, oh shit, I can't get a job. I'm gonna have to just do this.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I mean, certainly in its infancy, that's how it went. To start with, it was, can't get a senior job. If I can, you know, see a few patients a week, that'll add on the extra 3 or 4 grand that I'd have got if I'd have got that senior job in the NHS. So it kind of supplemented my income. Um, and then, before you know it, you're working Monday to Friday in the NHS. You're working Monday to Friday nights for yourself. You're working all day Saturday for yourself, all day Sunday for yourself. And then it's, oh gosh, there's not enough hours in the day. So I took someone on to work for me just as like on a contracting basis. And that was probably the hardest thing that I ever did, to be honest with you. Let another physio see one of my private patients. You build up this sort of caseload and a reputation locally. And yeah, then that happened. And then it got to the point where it's like, well, if we keep going like we are, I might be able to earn 2 junior physio salaries. And then at that point, it just kind of, it took off. And, when went in the right direction for the next few years.
And so when you said what made it take off, like what was it?
I think part of it was being honest. I think part of it was a lack of self-belief from me. That all of a sudden you see this opportunity and you think, this has been successful within sort of a year. We've got a clinic that's doing well. It's really busy. We've gone from a room in a gym to 2 rooms in a gym. We went from a fold-up bed to 2 hydraulic beds. £2,000 spend on beds. Like what's going on there? The first one only cost me £100, but it grew. It grew in that sense, and you just think, well, that's kind of like the blueprint. Is that why don't we go and do this 10 miles down the road in that direction, and that direction, and the other direction? So very quickly, opened up a few clinics doing that with various different people contracting, and the work was a mixture of in where I set up in Pudsey in my hometown. It was largely self referrals, private paying clients that wanted to come and see me personally, because of the reputation and the link with Sheffield Wednesday. But the other sites were probably grown largely on sort of medical legal work and sort of work that comes in from a contracted point of view. And then after doing that for a period of time, I took on my first member of staff, a receptionist, and took out a lease at a shop-fronted site in Pudsey and moved the gym into there. And then after that, took on another member of staff who was sort of from an admin, a bookings point of view, who's now our head of operations at Sano, sort of 12 years down the line, 13 years down the line. And it just kind of went from there. Just feel very fortunate that to start with, I employed some fantastic people, some great people with fantastic work ethic that were very loyal, that, bought into the idea of Sano and wanted to see it do well. And I always joke, if the first person or the second person that I took on hadn't have been the people that they were, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here today. That's for sure. It was those very humble beginnings and those people that really supported me and helped me grow the business, as to why we're here now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's a few things you mentioned there. So in terms of those people, then, like, how did you attract those people? Like you say, you're lucky, but I don't really believe in that luck piece of things. Like, how did they find you, or how did you find them?
Yeah. So the first one was the receptionist was a sister of someone that I knew that had just had a baby, left her job on maternity leave, and then just wanted a part-time job, and it just worked for me. It was local, and she came and worked on reception, was absolutely fantastic. The second person is now our head of ops. He was a physio assistant at Bradford Royal Infirmary. Met him in the in the changing room one day, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I quite fancy. I'm had enough of doing this, and quite fancy coming and doing some admin work or whatever you are. I'm studying management at university." And then that happened, and I guess after that, you grew, and we grew until we had PE investment. We grew to, it was about 40 staff when PE invested in Sano. I think as a sort of a business owner, a founder, if you like, you've just got that. You've got them values. You know what you aspire to do. You have your standards, and then we're just very sort of adamant that anyone that we took on had to be people that we wanted to work with, really. That wanted to be part of it and come on the journey, and we were fairly successful in that sense. Recruited some good physios and some good back office staff, and that facilitated it. That helped us on the journey.
Yeah, and I'm interested just from specifically for us at the moment, like we're recruiting like the back office thing, because that's not the clinical side of things, which you know what a good physio looks like in your mind, I guess. So back office wise, what do you think the skills are to be successful for within your organization?
Depends on the role. Now as a business, we employ over 50 people in our back office. Reception, client care team, finance, HR, operations, customer success. So it all depends on the role. But certainly, I think and probably cliche, isn't it? But you can always train somebody to be good at a job, but you can't train them to have a personality, to fit in, to have just that little bit about them that's I guess that's the difference, isn't it? That, you know, for us, it's about having good people with us on the journey, people that fit in with us, that share the vision, and yeah, want to come on the journey with us.
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting one with that because I think it's like is it the people that are good, for example, or is it the environment which resonates with the people? And it's because I think I've got so many friends in the industry that I really like them both, and but then they maybe don't get on well. Certainly in football, that happens fairly regularly. And it's like, well, is that just that the environment is just didn't quite mesh between those two individuals? So I think that like you said about values, culture, purpose, mission, all of these things are so crucial because everyone is clear on what they're coming into, what the expectations are, what everyone else is abiding by and buy into. And then all that other stuff, it kind of it's self-fulfilling that you've got people that are policing it for you and creating that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. And you know, what's been great to see over the years is, you know, you go back sort of what 10 years, sort of 8 years ago, and it was very much me leading the charge. Whereas, you know, I'd like to still think that I'm up there leading it. But we've now got, you know, for me, we've got a senior leadership team that are leading, you know, the 4 different sections of the business, and they're just so passionate about what we do, where we're going, and you can just see it sort of filtering down. It's like a cascading effect to the next level of middle management, then to their seniors, their juniors, etc. And it just flows through, doesn't it? That culture, it's fundamental for the business to be successful. But yeah, absolutely, I agree. Yeah, environment is absolutely key. I like to think that we've got that. You can never say right, but I like to think it's certainly on the righter side of things, shall we say? And yeah, have some very good people at the business.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's really nice to hear that drives the business still. So in terms of for you then, like what how have you changed or how has your leadership changed? Because when it was literally you were managing yourself, now to you've got 50 back office team, which is that's big in this area. So how have you changed in terms of your leadership?
Um, it's it's a good question. It's probably one that I don't reflect on as much as I should. It's kind of I guess from my perspective, there's kind of two sides to that as well. So I was working very much in clinic until PE invested, you know, and then after that, between 2017 and COVID, kind of just withdrew myself from clinic a little bit, and spent more time sort of you know, leading the business. And then after COVID, I was quite poorly, Andy. 2022, I had 5 months off work. And in that time, it was almost I was out of the business, and it was the opportunity for other people to step up. And they absolutely did that. They really did that. So I guess my leadership style has changed quite a bit because of that, because of being poorly and being off work. 2022 and 23 being quite turbulent. I left the business as certainly, you know, it was more it was my ideas and my direction, and this is where we're going to go, and bringing people on the journey to getting back. And I would say very much now, you know, it's best idea wins with our sort of senior leadership team and throughout the organisation. It's a very different way of working, and I think you know, I've learned a lot from a leadership point of view. I'm certainly a better listener now than I used to be. I think it's fair to say listen a lot and don't speak as much. Um, but for me, it's more a case now of we've got some great individuals, and it's working with them to try and get the best out of them rather than driving a business forward. Because ultimately, you know, they're the guys that now drive this business forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can resonate with that and understand like when you get that team in, like I was actually chatting to my mum and dad about this earlier on today, just about I catastrophize with things. So if I get a customer comes to us and says there's some issue and it may not even be a big one or they need something or whatever, I'm like, shit, is this, oh god, this is gonna we're screwed here, this is gonna be crap, which is completely irrational, but that's just the way I am, and I need to work on that myself. But like you must have had like loads of setbacks. Like how do you deal with those things when they happen?
Um, from a business perspective or on a
Well,
personal
just
level?
business and like again, just to finish off from my side, I guess I agree. Senior leadership team wise, they're brilliant because it's just like, oh yeah, no, I'll deal with that. That's fine. And I'm like, oh, thank God for that. I still have that, even we're a similar age business to you. Um, that massively helps me. Just that you've got that team that can just that's fine. That's what I'm here to do. Just don't you get involved. So I suppose personally, how do you deal with it? And because I guess you've already got that infrastructure of team that you wouldn't be dealing with the coal face of stuff anyway.
And I guess from a business perspective, I feel blessed. I've got a great team around me. Like I say, the leadership team. There's so many different personalities in that team, and so many different skill sets that come together and complement each other. And I always used to joke with our head of ops. He always used to say, like, me and him, like yin and yang. I'm the gung ho. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And he was the one that, well, let's just reflect on that and think about it. And over time, that it changes the way that you are as well. And I'd certainly say that I'm much more reflective now, and much less impulsive. I think it's fair to say as well. But on a personal level, I guess my career's kind of been, I didn't get a job, struggled to get a senior, didn't get a senior job, struggled to get a band 5 job. The health scare, the setbacks, etc. You just kind of become resilient, I guess, over time. And you realise that I'm a big believer everything happens for a reason, and there's always a way forward, no matter how bad it is. It'll sort itself out if you apply the right things, you live by your values, and you're consistent, and you just keep being resilient. You always come back. It used to always be the case with sport. Whenever you were playing rugby, don't matter how hard you get tackled, you always come back, don't you? Unless it's a massive tackle, that's a sort of a different concept. But yeah, I think it just naturally have become resilient because of probably what I've been through on a personal level.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think it is just a very simple thing. Is like it's going to be okay. It'll all be fine. Just know that within yourself, and you actually just. I think it's really important. And like reflecting, I found that really helpful to reflect and look at what you've done. Just go and take some time to just be out with the business and do that. I think it's really really important. So in terms of
And
like
I
the
think, sorry, I know, just because I think the other thing as well, which again is quite cliche, and I say it all the time to the kids. I've got 2 young kids that are 7 and 9, and I constantly say to them, I just want you to do your best. Go and do your best. And at the end of the day, coming to work, I do my best every day. Whatever I'm doing, I put everything into it, try my best, and you'd like to hope that's good enough. If it's not, I don't think you can really have any hang-ups about it. You've left nothing out there. You've tried your best, and move on. Simple as that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, isn't it, for the organization, is to know that like sometimes it doesn't work out the way you want it to be, but if you've got that philosophy and that mindset, I think that does empower the team to think actually, look, if that's what Matt's saying, then that's a really positive message to have.
And learning from it as well. You know, we all fail in things that we do, but it's we'll make a mistake or we will do something wrong. But let's learn from it. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. So it's that's absolutely crucial for us as a business that we learn from our mistakes. We're still very much, we're as we are now, the size that we are now. We've been like this for the last 3 or 4 years, but we're still learning every single day. And as long as we learn from what doesn't go right, it's going to help us in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of that growth then, so the private equity that you mentioned then, so how did that come about?
Um, how did it come about? So I kind of we got to a point. It was 2016, 17, and got to about 40 staff, 17 clinics. And I just thought to myself, I was working full time in clinic pretty much and trying to run the business around that. And I think I just kind of, I wouldn't say reached a ceiling, but I just thought, look, there's an opportunity here to kind of continue growing and scale this. And there's some exciting markets that we wanted to get into. Um, I'd I had a really good friend that worked in corporate finance who I played cricket with, and I'd sort of, chewed his ear off on a Saturday at cricket about opportunities and what we can do. And he asked me, "Have you ever thought about investment?" Well, no, absolutely not. And it seemed at the time the right thing to do to professionalize the business, and facilitate that sort of like next level of growth, if you like. So he put me in touch with various different people. At the time, I got 2 or 3 offers for the business as well, which at that time were quite flattering. I think having run it for maybe 6 years, only worked in it sort of full time for a couple of those years, and yeah, really flattering. But private equity seemed like a sensible option. And yeah, was introduced to our current PE backers, and yeah, they invested in the business back in July 2017, and since then we've grown significantly. We've diversified what we do. We've acquired 8 other physio businesses in that time frame, and yeah, it's been a really good journey. Had a really sort of good taste of private equity, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. So, how does it impact your decision making or just the business operations in general?
Um, I, it's different. It's very different, isn't it? I mean, historically, it was all on me, and if we lost a contract or something happened, it was me personally that would take the hit as the founder and business owner. It's a very different playing field though when you're in business with somebody, because it's not just you. You obviously they've invested a lot of money into back me and the management team, etc. But our I would say that we've always been aligned to our private equity backers. Their vision of what they wanted to do. They've allowed me to get on and do it. I wouldn't say that they're not involved, but from a day-to-day perspective, they're certainly not involved. They've professionalised the business. They've helped us from a reporting, a finance perspective. They've invested in the business to allow us to grow sort of systems and the platform and the clinics and the sort of rationalise them, invest in them, and then obviously helped us through acquisitions as well, funding the acquisitions. But I think in summary, they've helped us from a professionalising the business and sort of taking it to the next level. I, under no illusions, I qualified as a physio. I was an all right physio, decent physio. I certainly wasn't set up to run a business, and have learned so much in that time. And that's kind of that brings us to where we are now.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear it. I always find business so fascinating, and yours is quite a unique thing that you've gone through and are going through on it. So, in terms of like upskilling yourself or growing, developing all of those things, like, do you spend time reading books or podcasts around the business area of things?
Writer where I can. I mean, outside work, I literally just stand on a pitch side. That's me outside work. And I've got 2 of the sportiest kids ever born, I think. And every night or all weekend, we just stood on a pitch side watching them play sport. So yeah, audio books. Try to do that. Read books when I can. We went on holiday a couple of weeks ago, and I took a book with the best intentions of reading it. I think I read a couple of chapters because I spent the entire week in the pool with the kids, But I try my best. One thing that we have done is, and I think what was important to me is we've really invested in the team around us. So 2 of our leadership team have just completed their sort of executive leadership level 7 at Leeds Business School, which Sano's funded for them to do. So, obviously I learned from them as well. We're quite open to learning, and we've invested in the team, and they help from a certainly an academic and a skills perspective. But yeah, try my best to do it. Am I the sort of person that's going to go and do an MBA? No, it just doesn't appeal to me. It's not what I want to do on a personal level. But yeah, try my best, to listen, to be open minded to things, to have that growth mindset, to try and learn and develop.
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, I was going to ask about how you switch off, but it sounds like it's just watching sport, and that's your kids' sport.
Standing on a pitch side or watching the Villa. That's how we switch. Yeah, last weekend, Saturday, watched Villa v Fulham down at Villa Park. Sunday was stood on a pitch side all day.
It sounds could be worse. Could be worse on that one. And so, like, just like finally, what would your advice be? Like, you've got quite a unique position in terms of what you've gone through in terms of setting a company up, private equity. What would your advice be for anyone in the industry, not just people starting out?
In relation to what? In relation to private equity or just
I
the
think just in
journey?
terms of just the landscape within this area is massively changing. There's loads of opportunities. There's also it's quite uncertain. So just in terms of for people, what should people be considering to work out what they want to do? Yours sounds quite accidental to some extent.
Yeah, and I often get asked it, from I invest in other businesses, and I often get asked from people about should I set up on my own, or should I like what you've done, I want to emulate that, and I always say you've got to really sit down and think about it, decide what you want to do, what you want to get out of it. It's not easy, as obviously everyone that's on this podcast will tell you that runs a business. It's tough and it can be a lonely place at times. It isn't easy and it's not for everyone. So I think you've got to really decide what you want to achieve almost. I guess when you're thinking strategically, what is the end goal? Where do you want to get to? What would make you happy? Have that, as a goal, as a vision, and aim for that. And just back yourself. My entire sort of physio career didn't get the jobs, told not to set up privately, people doubt you, etc. And you just got to back yourself, because if you don't back yourself, no one else will do that. So yeah, believe in yourself. Have an end goal in sight, which can be daunting, certainly when you're setting out in your career. But you need to know where you want to get to, really. And just be open minded. Learn, be a sponge, soak everything up. No advice is bad advice, is it? Yeah, listen lots and talk less, probably.
I know, I definitely agree with that one. I think that's really good. That's why I enjoy doing these so much, because I try and say as minimal as possible, and it's really interesting to hear it. But I really appreciate you sharing your insights on it, and genuinely, it's amazingly impressive to do what you've done. And like you say, in that such a short period of time to get private investment, it's like that's really impressive. So well done doing what you're doing, and good luck with what you've got coming up next.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate your kind words. Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me on the pod as well.
No problem, no problem, and we'll see how Villa get on in see if they get in the Champions League first. But yeah, we'll go from there.
Only hope.
Cheers, Matt. Have a good one.
All right, cheers, Andy. Take care. Bye.